Yo, what's up? I'm FishFood89 and this here is the Learn Software Development video course, a step-by-step full course for getting into software development and the world of cyberspace. Why yet another course on software development? Is it yet another one? Or is this a first of its kind? I don't know. Don't have the answers to those questions. But what I do think is that there aren't enough of them. And what do I mean by this? First off, there are probably hundreds or even thousands of tutorials for specific programming languages, tools, frameworks, libraries, and operating systems. But I have yet to encounter a free online course that teaches all the essential basics one would need to create robust and professional software, which would allow for someone to start pursuing a professional software developer career. Now, as mentioned previously, there are a lot of tutorials on the essential basics and some advanced stuff as well, but they are typically in separate tutorials disconnected from each other. Nothing brings all that stuff together to form a coherent understanding of them all. This leaves the learners at loss as they don't know what else they would need to know to feel confident enough to think, hey, I actually understand this stuff and know enough to start doing things on my own. Also, I have yet to find any course that teaches how the mind of a software developer works when working on something. So what I'll try doing here is not only teach a bunch of tools, but also when to use them, why one would or should use them, and demonstrate how I go about solving the numerous problems I encounter when developing software. Now, secondly, teaching is fun. I just simply like doing this stuff. 3. I think learning is fun, and not just in the sense of me brainwashing you into an excited learner mindset. I am actually going to be learning a lot of new things while I'm teaching here. So I do not know everything I am about to teach when I teach it. Why am I doing this? Well, it's for the purpose of being able to demonstrate how my software engineer or software developer mind works when working on something. So with me learning new stuff while teaching, you get to observe how I approach a given problem. Now, these won't be textbook best practice methods on how I solve things as I'm just learning them. So just a demonstration of how a software developer's mind, in this case my mind, would work and give you some idea of what real-life software development is like. Number 4. This is a creative outlet for me. Simple as that. And now, onto the more concrete course contents. What you will be taught are the following things. What software development is. Some basic key concepts such as variables, conditional statements, loops, functions, data structures, and classes. You will also be taught the basics of the Godot engine. Godot is a free open source game engine which can be easily installed to the 3 largest operating systems, the 3 largest now being Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. You'll also learn how to create a graphical desktop application using the Godot engine. The Godot engine allows for easy creation of graphical desktop applications with its handy graphical user interface, tools, and features. You may have heard someone speak of a GUI, which is the abbreviation for graphical user interface. Some people pronounce the abbreviation GUI. Yes, not really the way abbreviation should be used or pronounced, but it is used quite a bit nonetheless, so might as well spill the beans here. Get used to it. So if someone says GUI in software development scenes, they are talking about a GUI, which here, just as a reminder, is the abbreviation for graphical user interface. Incidentally, I like to pronounce it also as GUI. Yes, so you're going to be hearing lots of GUI stuff here. And why am I talking about GUIs now? Well, because you need one when creating a graphical desktop application. So far, at least in the programming language courses I've attended, this isn't really being taught. What is typically used as a means of communication, also known as user interface, with software and programming language courses, is a console or terminal application. The interaction with the application or software, they're synonyms here, happens using only the keyboard, and the only graphics that are printed to the user is text. So when I started learning software development, this was a slight demotivator, as I was hoping to learn how to create applications where you could click on a menu bar, select things with the mouse, and have aesthetic graphics. This was what I encountered in university some 11 years ago, and luckily for me, I got to play around with touchscreens at work, so I did get fairly quickly into graphical user interfaces through work. But university didn't bring graphical user interfaces into my curriculum until the end of my first year. So in this course, I thought it would be fun to learn all of that while learning the programming part as well. I see no reason why they can't be taught in conjunction. The skills being taught here in regards to graphical user interfaces are applicable to mobile platforms such as mobile phones and mobile gaming devices, as well as desktop applications. So if you happen to be interested in how to create applications for mobile phones, these skills will help you there as well. Now, next up, GDScript. GDScript is the Godot Engine's own programming language. It is the language we will be using to program the behavior of our application and the features. In the game development world, it is common to hear people say scripting instead of programming, hence the name for GDScript, or so I believe. But consider them as synonyms in our case. It really depends on what you do and how you design your software, whether or not something ends up being called a script or a program. There are subtle hints in interpretation between the two on a general level in the software development community, but we'll skip those subtleties for now. A note about programming languages here as well. There are hundreds of programming languages in the world, and it doesn't really matter which one you learn first, as almost all of them share certain fundamental concepts. For example, I first learned C, then C++, a little bit of Java, Python, the basics of PHP, Bash, and one or two more niche proprietary programming languages. And obviously GDScript as the newest entry to my list of programming languages. So it doesn't really matter what you learn first. You will most likely be learning 3 or more if you really get into software development. Programming languages are essentially just tools, and you should be using the best tool for the job. And what that tool is really depends on the technological environment you're working in. Now, after all that talk, the main takeaways here are scripting and programming are in most cases synonyms. During this course, I'll be talking about programming. There are hundreds of programming languages in the world. The language used in this course is GDScript because that is the language used inside the Godot engine to program things. And moving on, debugging. We will learn also how to debug things, and not just how to use a debugger, which is a tool used for debugging. The Godot engine does have its own built-in debugger, which we will also be using. But debugging is more than just using a debugger. It is the process of finding, not guessing, but finding, really finding the cause of unwanted behavior. This unwanted behavior is called a bug for historical reasons I won't get into now, and debugging is the process of finding out where the bug is in the system and eventually, obviously, removing it as well. But we'll get into the specifics of debugging when we either have enough written code to demonstrate debugging, or, more likely than that, when I encounter a bug that I have introduced myself to the code unknowingly. That's the most common case. You write some code and you make a little mistake, and then you're wondering why does it work, and you've introduced a bug yourself, and then you need to figure it out. And sometimes they can be tricky to find, but we'll get into that. Don't worry. Next up, we will also learn the basics of version controlling with Git. Git is a version control system which allows us to store the changes between versions of the software. Highly useful and needed, especially when the software grows large in size or when there are more than one person working on the software. But even for solo projects, highly useful and recommended as it creates a history of how the software developed and thus allows for one to go backwards to a previous version of the software if something really went wrong at some point. Now, related to this, code review. I'll teach what code review is and why it is done. To do this efficiently and sensibly, we need a version controlling system. So that's how it's related to Git. So once we start using Git, we'll start covering code review as well. As we are not developing software with a team during this course, we'll apply code review to our own code before we commit things to the main branch in version control. This is a best practice to do also even if you're working with a team. Just, proofread your own code before having others proofread it. You might easily find something that should be fixed or stylized better. But more on that once we get there. Documentation, really important. Most courses that I have seen don't teach this, or if they do, it's more in the sense of comment your code as it works as documentation for yourself. But documentation is so much more than commenting your code. It not only helps you remember what you've done in a higher level, but makes it easier for others to understand what the software is about without having to read every single line of code to understand it. Now, this is something we will cover as we go along. It will be an integral part of the course, as it should be in real-world software development as well. Whenever somebody spares time in, I'll document this later, it tends to be skipped fairly easily and suddenly you're at loss, so this is something that is good to create a habit out of. Document things as you go. Now we'll also cover some basics about software licensing. Really important stuff as well, as is everything in this course. There's nothing unimportant. But we'll cover what copyright is and what licenses there are and how licenses govern the way software can be used and distributed in kind of the eyes of the law. Obviously, the law depends on the country or the jurisdiction that you're in, etc., etc. And note here, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a software development. So this is purely based on my understanding of software licensing and copyrights based on the research I've conducted myself. And if you really get into a pickle about licensing, it's always best to turn to a professional lawyer, someone who really knows about IPRs or intellectual property rights. There's tons of them in the world, as this is a very big thing, software and its licensing. But when in doubt, definitely seek a professional. But we'll cover the basics based on what I've understood. I'll also give some ideas on what steps you could take to make software development into an actual career. I might drop in some insights here and there throughout the course, but near the end I'll have a single video, most likely single video. I reserve the rights to change my opinion, as I'm still building this course while I'm recording this. But yeah, towards the end, I have the idea of having a single video in which we'll cover some of these further steps with more detail, and also a video on applying for jobs in the software industry. So what to search for, how to interpret some of the job ads, CV stuffs, what are important in the CV when applying for software development job, and stuff like that. Some real-life practical things that can help you out there. And next, let's go through some of the things that will not be taught. So, you will not be taught how to hack into a computer. Certainly a handy skill to have if you happen to lock yourself out of your own computer, but that is not within the scope of this course. Unless, of course, I happen to lock myself out of my own computer, in which case I might as well make a video on that. But don't hold your breath on that. I haven't locked myself out of a computer for 15 years or so. So, hence, not be taught. How to create a scalable web application. That's none of that in this course. We won't be learning any Linux system administration, how to tune your Windows operating system, any Mac OS tricks to improve your productivity, so no 5 things you should use in your Mac OS to do this and this quicker and faster. None of that. Also, we won't be covering any other programming languages, so we're sticking to the Godot engine and its programming language GDScript. Anything about blockchains or cryptocurrency. None of that. Nor will you be taught taking the easy way. As this is a video, you can't really, without enormous efforts with some optical content recognition software, copy-paste any of the things you see on the screen. So the hard way it is. With the hard way, I mean you will need to type each and every part of code yourself. With this, you'll better remember what you wrote, as you typing it requires you to think of everything you type in addition to reading it. And also kinetic memory comes into assistance in remembering when you type things out. So the hard way it is. And moving on towards the end here, how will things be taught? Well, we will have some lectures, such as the next video. It'll be a lecture video. After that, we'll have some hands-on learning on the spot. Not quite live streaming, but close. I do edit my videos, but anything I do related to actually developing software, I do not really plan ahead of time. So, in other words, the order in which I write my code, the way I search for answers and test things out in a given video are not planned ahead of time. And this is so that I can give a demonstration of what really goes in the mind of a software developer when developing software. And of course, follow along. You learn by doing it yourself. You can, of course, go through all of the videos and then evaluate if you want to give yourself a try on a later date. But if you really want to learn software development, then the only working way that I know of is by doing it yourself. So follow along, do it yourself. This is referring also to the taking the hard way, not the easy way, mentioned in the previous slide. And that covers the introduction to the course. In the next video, we'll have a short lecture on what is software development. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Ciao.